The meeting hall of the Galactic Council was a chamber of vast, polished quartz and floating data streams. It was the highest seat of power in the known galaxy, and today it felt strangely cold. The delegates, representing civilizations that had mastered interstellar travel millennia ago, were discussing a species they still considered new and unsettling: the human Commonwealth. Delegate Kell, a Zilorian with 6 segmented limbs and skin like polished obsidian, extended 2 of its arms toward a 3-dimensional projection. The image displayed was a simple blue and green marble: Earth. "We have reviewed the human Commonwealth's file for the 15th time this cycle," Kell stated, its voice a smooth, low hum that filled the vast room without echoing. "The conclusion remains unchanged. They are too soft, too focused on avoiding the ultimate cost." Around the horseshoe-shaped table, the other delegates offered silent acknowledgments. A crystalline Zidanian shimmered slightly, its facets catching the light, an expression of agreement. The Zidanians valued efficiency and cold, hard logic. Humanity's messy history baffled them. "Observe their records," Kell continued. The projection shifted, displaying a timeline of human history, not of expansion, but of conflict. "Every large-scale engagement is preceded by agonizing debate, moralizing, and endless attempts at peace. They do not embrace conflict, they are dragged to it. They seek to minimize risk, even at the cost of strategic advantage." Kell tapped a point on the timeline, highlighting a historical period of global tension on Earth. "They call this hesitation. We call it fundamental weakness. They fear the brutal, prolonged nature of true warfare. They are sentimental about their own survival. They grieve too much for the individual when the whole is at risk." Another delegate, a large, slow-moving species known as the Gorgon, shifted in its containment field. "The mission to Ryloth Prime requires decisive action. The previous 4 expeditionary forces failed to secure the landing zones, suffering total loss within days. We need a species capable of ruthless, continuous application of force." Kell's 6 limbs contracted slightly, a gesture of impatience. "Which is precisely why the humans are the perfect candidate for this pacification mission. It is high risk, a situation where only brutal, continuous force will succeed. The jungle forces of Ryloth Prime are legendary for crushing heavily armed expeditions." The Council understood the subtext. This mission was designed to fail. It was meant to be a test that reinforced the Council's low opinion of the human Commonwealth. When the humans inevitably faltered, lost momentum, or retreated due to high casualties, the Council would use it as leverage to limit human expansion and military access. "The assignment is approved," the lead Zidanian delegate stated, its voice a high, precise chime. "The human Commonwealth is tasked with the immediate pacification of Ryloth Prime. Operation title: Redemption. Effective immediately." Thousands of light-years away, aboard the human vessel Trekker, the order arrived. Commander Alex Stone was in the bridge simulation room reviewing terrain schematics when the notification flashed across his private console. Alex was a man built for quiet action, with a history forged not in grand space battles, but in the tight, unforgiving spaces of urban warfare on fringe colonies. He preferred simplicity and directness. He opened the encrypted file. The mission parameters were harsh. Ryloth Prime, an environmental nightmare. Codename: Jungle Forces. Chloe Vance, the Trekker's communications officer, sat nearby, tracing the original transmission path. She looked up, her expression tight. "Commander, the transmission originated from the Citadel. The primary diplomatic channels were, frankly, dripping with condescension. They spoke about our suitability for the task,
It felt less like an assignment and more like a punishment. Alex didn't look up immediately. He was studying the projected images of Ryloth Prime, an endless, choking emerald canopy with geological scans showing roots as thick as city buses threading through the unstable soil. Condension is their default setting, Chloe, Alex finally said, his voice level. They call us sentimental because we don't treat death as a simple accounting error. They call us weak because we don't charge blindly into a meat grinder. He finally looked at the data stream of the Council's final meeting notes. The phrase, "designed to fail," was not written, but it hung in the air of every line of instruction. The Council believed humans would reach a certain casualty limit, and then their supposed sentimental nature would kick in, causing them to pull back and abandon the mission. "It looks like they want us to prove we're cannon fodder, sir," Chloe noted, lowering her voice. "Ryloth Prime has broken full-scale, dedicated military forces. We are a search and rescue vessel refitted for tactical deployment. We are not equipped for this kind of war." Alex walked to the main viewport, which was currently dimmed, showing only his own reflection over the dark expanse of space. "No, we are not equipped for their kind of war, Chloe. We are equipped for ours." He paused, a flicker of something old and hardened in his eyes. "They see our history as a series of hesitations. They don't understand that for humans, when the talking stops, the gloves come off. And they definitely don't understand what a human will do when it's cornered." Alex turned and issued the order. "Prepare the landing module. Notify the ground teams to abandon standard formation templates. We are not fighting a civilized war. We are fighting a jungle. We adapt or we die. No retreat is authorized until the mission objective is secured." He accepted the challenge not with grand declarations, but with the quiet, burning confidence of someone who had faced true chaos before. The Council said humans feared war. Alex knew they simply understood the cost. And now the jungle of Ryloth Prime was about to find out exactly what happens when humanity is pushed past its limit. The trekker changed course, heading toward the green hell of Ryloth Prime.
The landing was rough. The trekker's module slammed into the surface of Ryloth Prime, the impact muffled by what sounded like thick, wet mud and heavy foliage. The airlock hissed open, and Sergeant Ben Hayes led his squad, Unit 7, out onto the ramp. The atmosphere hit them first. Hot, humid, and thick with the scent of ozone and decaying plant life. The world was beautiful in a terrible way. Everything was oversized, wet, and green. The canopy above was so dense that daylight could not reach the ground, leaving the jungle floor in a perpetual, eerie twilight, lit only by scattered, faintly glowing fungi and vines. "Sensors are fuzzy, Sarge," called out a young soldier named Mark from the back of the line. "Too much biological interference. I'm picking up hundreds of energy signatures that don't match anything in the database." Ben signaled his team forward. "Stick to the grid. Don't trust the screens. Trust your eyes and the guy next to you." The first sign of the planet's hostility was not an enemy soldier, but the environment itself. Within minutes, the dew dripping from the high canopy began to sting and burn. It was mildly acidic. The soldiers' advanced armor hissed as the liquid hit, forcing them to activate full environmental seals. Their anti-gravity vehicles, designed to float smoothly over any terrain, were useless. The ground was a treacherous web of roots as hard as stone and mud that could swallow a boot whole. The vehicle stabilizers fought constantly against the uneven, twisting surfaces, quickly overheating. The human force had deployed in a standard linear formation, heavy armor at the front, infantry sweeping the flanks. It was the way every other galactic military fought. It was also the way they died here. The ambush was silent, sudden, and total. It began with the loss of Unit 2.
a heavy armor squad half a kilometer away. There was no warning shout, no transmission, just a sudden, deafening silence on the tactical comms. Ben's unit felt the attack next. It wasn't an enemy charge, it was the jungle itself moving. The foliage they thought was stable plant life suddenly became fast, whirring insectoid predators, bursting from the ground and leaves. They were small, armored, and moved too fast for the targeting systems to lock on. "Contact! All sides!" Ben yelled, raising his rifle. He fired a burst of plasma at something that looked like a large, multi-legged flower, only to watch it instantly fold into a ball and roll away, unharmed, before bursting open again and spitting sharp spines. A soldier to Ben's right screamed and fell. The man had been hit by a piece of vine that wasn't a vine at all, but a hardened, biomechanical limb that wrapped around his neck. Two more soldiers rushed to help him, but as they did, the ground beneath them opened, revealing a pit lined with acid-secreting moss. It was not a fight against an army. It was a battle against a single, hostile, planet-sized organism. The enemy didn't wear uniforms. It was the atmosphere, the ground, the plants, and the creatures all working together. Within the first hour, the human casualty rate went from 0 to critical. The heavy armor, which should have provided cover, instead acted like slow, loud targets, drawing the planet's most aggressive defenses. Every attempt to use standard protocols, calling in air support, setting up fixed firing lines, only exposed the troops to more unseen dangers. At the temporary forward operating base, nestled in a small, relatively clear valley near the landing site, Communications Officer Chloe Vance worked frantically at a smoking console. The screens showed red crosses flashing across the tactical map faster than she could log them. "I need a status report from Unit 7, Sarge Ben." Static filled the comms for a horrifying 10 seconds before Ben's voice, ragged and strained, broke through. "We're down to 3 men, Chloe. 3. I'm pulling back. Everything here moves. Our heat signatures draw the fast ones. I saw things dissolve the armor plating, things we couldn't even target." Chloe swallowed hard, looking at the total casualty tally. It was already over 60% of the deployed forces. The Council's prophecy was coming true. They were being decimated because their sophisticated, linear approach was a perfect mismatch for this primal, brutal environment. Commander Alex Stone stepped into the command tent, his face grim. He looked at the screens not in anger, but with cold, quiet realization. The heavy armor, the precision sensors, the air superiority, none of it mattered. They had tried to fight a civilized war, and the jungle had eaten them alive. "Chloe, notify all remaining ground forces," Alex commanded, his voice sharp but steady. "Abandon all heavy vehicles. Retreat immediately to the highest, most defensible piece of ground you can find. Forget the mission objective for now. Survival is the objective." He knew the order was nearly impossible to follow. The jungle was everywhere. There was no map, no clear path, no safety zone. The green hell of Ryloth Prime had swallowed the galaxy's most advanced soldiers, proving that the Council was right about one thing. The fighting here required a ruthlessness beyond their current training. But Alex had seen that look in Ben's eyes, and he knew that for the few remaining humans, the need to survive had just unlocked something far more dangerous than anything the Council or the Jungle had expected.
The remaining human soldiers found a small space of hard rock about 100 meters above the muddy jungle floor. It was a temporary sanctuary, a place where the worst of the crawling, digging biomechanical life could not easily reach them. 52 people were all that was left of the landing force. The area was cramped, hot, and smelled of fear and spent plasma. Commander Alex Stone stood before the survivors. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with mud and dried sweat. He didn't shout. He didn't offer comfort. He offered a cold, hard truth. "We used the wrong book," Alex said simply, looking at the tired faces of his soldiers. "We fought like a galactic power. We fought loud, we fought heavy, and we died fast. The Council was right. That kind of war is a weakness here." A silence settled over the small group, broken only by the distant, wet-clicking sounds of the jungle. "We are done fighting their war," Alex continued. "We are done relying on sensors that fail and armor that melts. From this moment, we are throwing away the book the Council gave us. We are going back to the oldest human book there is, the Book of Survival." He looked specifically at a young reconnaissance specialist named Riley Finn. Riley had been quiet, observing the jungle more than fighting it. She had studied the native growth patterns even as her comrades were falling. "Riley, you are in charge of concealment. I want every person here to become invisible. I want no metal showing, no clear outlines, and no heat signatures that stand out. Use the mud, use the leaves, use the bark, I don't care. You stop being a soldier and you become part of the background noise." Riley nodded, her eyes already scanning the dense foliage around their small perimeter. She immediately started teaching the others how to cut and weave the local plants into camouflage that worked with the ambient light. They discarded the heavy armor plating that was only slowing them down, and instead rubbed the thick dark mud of Ryloth Prime over their exposed undersuits. They looked less like advanced soldiers and more like prehistoric figures rising from the swamp. Sergeant Ben Hayes, who had led the only squad to retreat with a significant number of survivors, was given the task of retraining small units. "No more lines," Ben told his troops, his voice low. "No more teams larger than 3. We move only when the jungle moves. We move slow, we move quiet. We are hunters now, not targets." Ben implemented what he called ghost squads. They relied on silence, hand signals, and instinct. They learned how to step on the root systems without making a sound, and how to breathe without fogging their helmet masks. They started understanding the planet's rhythms, when the acid dew would stop falling, and which insects hunted which biomechanical vines. The technical teams, led by Chloe Vance, worked on modifying the remaining equipment. The sophisticated plasma rifles were too loud and bright. They broke down the weapons, refitting the power cells and targeting systems. They managed to create a setting for a suppressed burst, a quiet, low-powered discharge that was useful for killing the small, fast predators without alerting the larger territorial creatures. Their multi-tools, which were originally used for repairing complex machinery, were now used to carve crude, sharp wooden stakes and create simple, powerful spring traps using the jungle's own materials. The change in mindset was the most important step. The Council had called them weak because they valued life. But now that need to survive, that fear of being completely erased, turned into a focused, terrifying energy. They were no longer afraid of the jungle forces. They were learning to respect them, and in turn, learning how to kill them silently. Alex watched as Riley led the first scout team out of the rock sanctuary. They melted into the green shadows instantly. They were not attacking a threat. They were infiltrating an environment. They were becoming the environment's most deadly adaptive feature. They were no longer fighting the jungle. They were learning its rules so they could use them. The Council wanted to see if the humans would break when cornered. Instead, the humans had simply gotten quiet, stripped down, and sharpened their oldest instincts. They were no longer victims. They were transforming into the predators of Ryloth Prime.
Riley Finn moved like a shadow. The dark mud, mixed with crushed local leaves, made her suit blend perfectly with the deep green and brown twilight of Ryloth Prime. She was part of the background now, not a bright, loud target. She carried a knife made from a piece of sharpened ship metal and the modified plasma rifle, silent and ready. She had been outside the rock sanctuary for 10 hours, and she had not fired a single shot. Her small team of 3, one of Ben Hayes' new ghost squads, was tracking a patrol path used by the swift 6-legged creatures that made up the core of the jungle forces. These creatures were armored and fast, easily avoiding the tracking software of the early human deployment. But they followed patterns. They were predictable. Riley knelt, signaling a halt with one hand. She pointed to a thick, low root. At that spot, her team had spent 2 hours setting up a simple booby trap. It was not electronic, it was purely mechanical. A tripwire made of strong, thick vine was tied to a large, heavy piece of volcanic rock disguised with moss. The sound of the jungle forces approached, a distinctive, wet, clicking noise. 3 of the creatures scuttled quickly down the route path, relying on speed and natural armor. They expected resistance to be loud, heavy, and focused on advanced sensors. They did not expect Stone Age tactics. The lead creature's front legs snagged the vine. There was a short, sharp snap, and the heavy rock swung down from the canopy with crushing force. It struck the first creature instantly, destroying its internal structure. The other 2 creatures stopped, confused. They looked around, their sensory organs twitching, searching for a heat signature or a plasma flash. They saw nothing but leaves and shadows. Before they could move, Riley's teammate, who was hidden 50 feet away, used a simple, low-tech crossbow he had fashioned from spare parts and jungle wood. It fired a long, sharpened metal bolt that found the gap in the second creature's armor plating. The creature collapsed silently. The last one, still confused, turned and ran into the dense foliage without making a sound. It was over in less than 30 seconds. No alarms went off. No large predators were drawn to the sound. It was quiet, efficient murder. Commander Alex Stone monitored the transmissions from his tiny, secure command post in the sanctuary. The reports coming in were different now. They were not casualty reports, they were mission reports. Unit 7, 3 confirmed kills, 0 noise pollution. Unit 4, securing perimeter south, successful deployment of biomechanical irritant, area clear for 4 hours. The humans had studied the biomechanics of the jungle forces. They found that simple irritants, a certain type of fermented local fruit mixed with water, would mess up the creature's chemical sensory organs, effectively blinding them and chasing them from key areas. They were using the jungle's own materials against its inhabitants. Sergeant Ben Hayes was leading a large-scale sweep to secure a permanent forward base. He moved with slow, deliberate confidence. The heavy equipment they had abandoned earlier was now being scavenged for basic power cells and tools. They even used the metal plating of the destroyed vehicles to line their new hidden base, making it resistant to the worst of the acid dew. The remaining soldiers had changed. The panic and fear were gone, replaced by a terrible patience. They looked like wraiths in their mud-smeared suits, quiet and invisible. They could spend a full day unmoving, waiting for the perfect moment to set a trap or place a modified mine. They had learned to read the shifting colors of the canopy, the change in the humid air, and the specific sounds that meant danger or safety. The Council had seen the human ability to build cities and space stations. They had seen the human desire for peace and argument. They called it weakness. They failed to see the deep, hard core of survival that was hundreds of thousands of years old. They failed to see what humans were like when all the rules of civilization were taken away and only the instinct to live remained. Alex looked at the map. The red crosses marking losses had stopped appearing. Instead, a small dark gray zone,
A zone where the jungle forces dared not tread was slowly growing outward from the center. The humans were no longer the hunted. They had become the shadow in the green twilight, the new predator of Ryloth Prime, and they were moving toward the mission objective silently and ruthlessly. The world that was designed to kill them was now a hunting ground.
The final kilometer to the relic energy station was the most dangerous, yet the quietest part of the entire mission. Commander Alex Stone led the remaining force, now just 38 people, through a dense ravine. They moved like the water they were tracking, silent, unstoppable, and seeming to belong to the hard, root-choked stone. The station, a relic left by a long-dead civilization, was only meters away. The objective was guarded not by enemy soldiers, but by a final, highly complex defense, a ring of large bioluminescent spores that reacted to advanced electromagnetic energy. Any plasma weapon fire or loud electronic signal would cause them to explode instantly, alerting every creature on this side of the planet. The original plan had called for heavy artillery to clear the field. The new plan called for silence and cleverness. Riley Finn, scouting ahead, signaled the threat back to Alex using a series of specific bird calls she had learned to mimic perfectly. A high, sharp chirp for danger, followed by a low, vibrating hum for energy field. They were invisible, but they could not be loud. Sergeant Ben Hayes and 2 engineers used a captured, modified filtration device to gather a large amount of the fermented, blinding fruit juice they had discovered earlier. This juice temporarily neutralized the chemical sensors of the jungle forces. Instead of shooting, they used a manual catapult built from flexible, strong branches and thick jungle vines. They launched small pressurized bladders of the blinding liquid onto the sensitive spores. The spores reacted exactly as Riley predicted. They began to try and clean themselves, twitching and closing, their high-frequency detection systems temporarily disabled by the organic solvent. The entrance was clear. This was not war. It was problem-solving using environmental mastery. The humans had defeated the planet's final defense using simple physics and fermented fruit. Alex and Chloe Vance entered the station. It was cold and silent, a stark contrast to the boiling chaos outside. Chloe quickly interfaced her modified communications equipment with the relic's console, extracting the vital energy data that the Council had needed. The mission was successful, achieved by men and women who had discarded 90% of their advanced technology. Light years away, in the clean, silent, and highly structured Council chamber, the Council of Allied Species watched the real-time feeds. They had prepared a long, formal statement about the predictable failure of the human deployment and the need to send proper, armored professional troops. The screen should have been black, showing their failure. Instead, the Council watched in horrified silence. The video feed showed static images of a dark, mud-smeared man, Alex, transferring data onto a crude drive. Then it showed an image of a woman, Riley, calmly setting a final trip trap with a carved wooden stake and a piece of wire. The camera was on a soldier, heavily camouflaged, eating a ration bar while listening to the jungle sounds, completely at home in the death world. The 6-limbed Xylorian delegate stood up, his posture rigid, his voice tight. They have succeeded, he whispered, the sound echoing in the silent room. They used the low-tech response. Another delegate, a gas breather named Gorn, pointed a trembling limb at the screen, which showed Ben Hayes, covered head to toe in mud, calmly sharpening a piece of scavenged vehicle metal into a knife. Gorn's translator unit stated, "They are not fighting with technology. They are fighting with dirt, wood, and pure malice. They are not civilized." "They are more than civilized, Gorn," the Xylorian delegate countered, sitting down heavily. "They are survivors. We called their caution a fear of war. We said they lacked the ruthlessness of true military powers." He paused, gazing at the image of the now secure human base, which was simply an invisible hole in the rock. Alex Stone's final transmission came through, raw and clear,
bypassing the diplomatic channels and delivering only the essential mission data and one single quiet audio message. Mission complete. Objective secured. We did not use the professional methods. We used what works. The Council realized the terrifying truth. Humans did not fear war. They feared the high cost of it, the waste, the noise, the destruction. But when all their polite options were gone, when all that was left was the instinct to survive, they would strip down, go quiet, and become something ancient, quiet, and absolutely unbeatable. They had feared the human weakness, but they had just witnessed the true human core strength, the will to survive by becoming the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. They would never judge them as weak again.